I'm Janice Francisco, and I'm the founder of BridgePoint Effect. We're an organizational development and innovation strategy company. We're based in Toronto, Canada, and we work globally with clients who want to collaborate, innovate, and work better together.
And I am Sarah Thurber, managing partner at FourSight. We do research in publishing and training in the innovation space. We're probably best known for publishing the FourSight Thinking Profile, which is an assessment of creative cognition. And our mission is really to capture the valuable research in the field of creativity and transmit it to teams and organizations that are trying to create new value and growth at scale. And we're very excited about this study that we've done with Innovators and BridgePoint Effect. Can't wait to share the results.
First, we're going to give you some background information and context on what spurred this research and how it actually came together. Then, so that you'll understand the results when we share them, we need to give you some basic information about the FourSight Thinking Profile assessment that Sarah just talked about and that we also used in conducting this study. From there, we're going to show you the results of the study and how, by leveraging a number of other research pieces that we had access to, we've been able to shed new light on why innovation seems to be so hard in organizations, and more importantly, what you can do to make it easier.
We want to make sure that when Janice and I are throwing around terms like creativity and innovation, that we've got a level set, that everyone's on the same page. So when we're using the term creativity, we are not referring to creative expression or the big aha moment or even big ideas. What we're referring to is the greater ability to generate novelty that's useful. So we're drawing a big circle around the word creativity. Creativity is often, from the research, we know it's often a phenomenon done by individuals or by small groups. Innovation, by contrast, is the effort to capture and scale the value of creativity. That requires teams. That requires cross-functional teams. That requires organizations. So the phenomenon of creativity, while it happens in individuals and small groups, is really, in essence, the front end of innovation.
The research that we've conducted and that FourSight had started into is based on 65 years of research. Sarah said we're all creativity research nerds. It's based on this research that has identified there is a universal creative process that everyone, when faced with a challenge, engages in. And the process looks like this. They clarify typically what the problem is, what the situation or opportunity is. They find some ideas to help solidify it. They develop those ideas and turn them into something that's workable and that'll actually live within the environment that they're in and work to get it implemented. And that's what we all go through as we go through this process. Now, when Sarah was saying that creativity is many kinds of thinking, this is much of the research that FourSight found in order to build this assessment that we've been using. And so creativity is 4 kinds of thinking. So yes, it is about ideas, but there's a lot of creativity in clarifying what a problem is, developing a solution, and also getting it implemented. And what the research that FourSight conducted found was that people have preferences for engaging in that process. And more interestingly, that translates into teams. Teams have preferences for how they like to think and work, and job functions also. So we're going to be telling you a little bit more about that. Now, you can probably relate to this if you're engaged in innovation. So Sarah said everybody looks at a problem differently, just much like they use their hands. Well, if you take a look at that great idea or new product or shiny new thing that you're trying to implement in an organization, you likely have taken it to different people and found that this is kind of some of the viewpoint. People look at things very differently, and yet it's exactly the same thing. So in 2018, Sarah and I, with the Innovators team, traveled to 4 continents, 6 cities, and found over 400 corporate innovators at the Innovators conferences who were willing to complete the profile and give us the research data that we needed to do this study. Now, once we got that all gathered, The researchers at FourSight took a big, deep look at it, and they compared what we found to the 11 organizational functions, another research study that they had done that looked at how does innovation play out across functions and organizations. And just to make sure this was completely legitimate, they also took a snapshot of the general population of people who had completed a FourSight Thinking Profile assessment in that exact same time frame in 2018. And we had over 13,000 people who had completed that at the time that we were able to do the comparative to. What we're proud to say is, as a result, the three organizations have actually been able to build the first ever cognitive profile of innovators in organizations. And it answers a heck of a lot of questions around who we are and why we can't do it alone. And more importantly, it offers some hope and some really tangible solutions around what we can do about it to make innovation a lot easier.
Thanks, Janice. Okay, so the reason we picked the FourSight Thinking Profile to do this study is that FourSight really measures how people engage in creative process. And of course, that's what we are doing when we're trying to innovate, and what we're doing when we're asking people to bring innovation through an organization. Everybody's got to engage. The profile itself is a pretty easy situation. There are 36 scored questions, takes 10 minutes to do, but what it shows is it shows where in the process your energy peaks and where it drops. It's not a measure of capacity, it's not a measure of ability, it's a measure of really energy. When I give you a pen and say, write your name really fast, you grab it with the hand that you naturally prefer. If I give you a ball and say, kick a goal, you kick it with the foot that you naturally prefer. If I give you a problem and say, go solve it, you grab it with the thinking style you naturally prefer. And that's a phenomenon that happens without consciousness. But what happens is, because it's not conscious, we don't recognize that the way we do it is different than the way other people do it. And we blithely go along doing our job, assuming that the way we think about things probably is the way people think about things. So in fact, what we find is when you measure people's preference for clarifying and ideating and developing and implementing, you'll find that 50% of the population has a single preference. They prefer one thing over the other. Implementers are our most common. 20% of people have two preferences. So they might be a combination of clarifier and implementer. And all of those combinations will sort of affect how people grab onto a problem and how they work through it. It will also affect how they engage with other people who are working on the same problem and may or may not have the same profile. Clarifiers really love the front end of the process. They love looking at a challenge, an opportunity, the landscape, and understanding what's happening, what's real, what's been done before. So these guys are fundamentally realists. They want to get a clear picture of what is. And they want to understand what is happening so well that they want to understand where the problems are, and specifically how to frame a problem. So if they take aim at it, they're going to get a solution that points them in the right direction. Then we go to ideators. A little different in kind. Ideators are really not at all about the problem. They're not really that interested in the reality and the hard facts and the meticulous spreadsheets. They're really interested in the big picture, in the possibilities, in using their imagination to cast out new possibilities. They're also extremely drawn to novelty and originality. They really like variety, they like new, they like making and seeing new connections. So a very different bird from the clarifier. Ideators are like, what's possible and what could happen in the future? Okay, next slide. Then we go to developers. Remember, this is the third diamond in that process, where developers are the folks who really like to take an idea and then make the bridge from the idea, which tends to be a pretty rough, abstract concept, to the solution, which is something you can sell or move or make or do something with. So developers are really idea engineers. They like to take an idea and then they like to try to understand how they can make it real in the world. You think of a bridge. A bridge is a perfect engineering job. Somebody's conceptualized we ought to have a bridge. Everybody wants to use the bridge. It's the developers who literally engineer the bridge all kind of conceptually and make sure it's going to work before it ever goes live. Okay, and implementers, woohoo! Implementers are the just do it people. They're the people who are really inclined to action. They're the people who sit at a meeting and the whole time they're thinking, so what are we going to do? So what are the results? So what's the bottom line? So implementers are a big driving force in pushing things through the organization, in getting things done. They tend to be really willing to jump into action and have a lot of confidence that we're going to learn as we go. Taking the FourSight profile and looking at hundreds of thousands of profiles and matching them with our demographic data, this is what we find. What you're looking at in this slide is a compilation of FourSight profile by job function. So in each of these boxes, you'll see, for instance, on top, consulting. They'll be on the top left. Consulting has sort of that 4-point graph. Each of the points measures the preferences in order. So the point on the left measures preference for clarifying. The point just next to it is the measure. The peak point is measured for ideating, then developing and implementing. So these 4-point graphs measure each of the assessment, each of the stages in the assessment. So what you can see also is that while we have thinking profiles for consulting and advertising and finance, etc., we were missing a profile for innovators. And that was really the impetus for working with the Innovators Conference and coming up with, like, who are corporate innovators? So this is what we found. We gave the assessment to 410 participants, as Janice said, and we did compare it to 13,000 of the general population. And what we find clearly is that while the general population in green has a nice, even, balanced approach to problem solving, that's really not the case with our innovator audience. Innovators have a lower than average preference for clarifying. Not so interested in what are the numbers, what's the reality, what can't be done. No, forget it. Their interest is in ideation, like what are the possibilities, what could we do that's new, how can we make new connections to bring something new. Again, an energy dive when it comes to developing, like how do we engineer this solution so it's perfect in the system that we have and with the customers that we are going to get it. But an energy increase in let's make it, let's do it, let's try it out. So overall, the way to read this profile of innovators in blue is innovators, by and large, are people who fall in love passionately with their ideas and want to make them, and really can't quite understand all the resistance coming at them from all sides. So that's where we landed. And when you go to the next slide, you'll see when you tuck that finding in with the rest of the sort of stained glass window of who else is in the organization, you can see that innovators is a pretty distinctive profile. It kind of matches some and it's kind of the opposite of others. And that's what I want to go through and show you. What we know is that jobs have certain cognitive demands, and people who like that type of cognition tend to be attracted to that type of job. So this is not happening in just one organization. This wasn't one study that happened 1 year. This is an organizational phenomenon. This is in every organization. Even in my office, our bookkeeper, a clarifier. You know, our salesperson, an implementer. Our IT guys, developers. And we didn't pick them for their profile. We could have, but we didn't. And we don't. We pick them for their expertise. But it turned out that their profiles, by and large, match their expertise. So in all likelihood, this phenomenon is happening in your organization right now as well. So let's go to the next slide and see who is compatible with the innovators, right? This sort of shape of this line with such a high peak in ideators, the other people in the organization that are like-minded, literally like-minded, are consultants, advertising, design. We also know from our research, top executives tend to have a peak in ideation because they have to do big thinking and visionary thinking. Those are the folks that are very, very compatible in general. Probably not a surprise to you guys. But look who's versus. So these are the groups in organizations that just cognitively do not share the innovator cognitive disposition. Finance, operations, quality, engineering, IT, purchasing, sales. Oops. These are the people who fund, build, run, approve, code, and buy and sell your new idea. That's a problem. That's a big problem.
Here's what I like about FourSight in helping to solve that problem. How do we help people understand who they are in that innovation process and what they can contribute in the organization to make innovation come through? As soon as you understand who you are and how you think in the process, you start to have the code to how to unlock how you talk to and work with other people in the organization. And you learn where you might have your blind spots so you can flex your thinking and learn to think in new ways so that you can meet people where they are. And so one of the things that FourSight offers is a really great language to help do that. So we talk a lot about that when we do the trainings. We thought it would be fun to take some of the basic differences that we experience. And if you start to attune yourself to this, trust me, the next time you go to a meeting, you're going to be able to peg out who's what. And you're going to start to see this quite intuitively. But let's look at this from the lens of you as an innovator, where you're attempting to sell your big idea into the organization. So let's look again more concretely at what it is that innovators like to talk about. So you know what? They're focused on their fresh, new, and exciting ideas. They have raw ideas that haven't been thought through. The analogy I like to do is they're looking at trees in a forest and they're looking at all the opportunities. And they're very passionate and idealistic about, they talk about the stuff that they're very passionate and idealistic about. At the same time, they're very focused on telling you how they can make things better by doing something new and different. They talk about their vision for the big future. And of course, they're talking in abstract terms. It's a very big picture. It's conceptual. And why aren't you getting it? Now, an ideator going to talk to a clarifier is going to need to understand that the clarifier's focus is, I want to know what's the problem you're solving? What's the precedent? What's the best practice? They're going to want to know, how does what you're doing connect to the strategy and priorities we've already set out in this organization? They're certainly going to want to know, so have you done your research? Are you organized? Don't come to a clarifier in a very disorganized fashion. And more importantly, they're going to want to know, so have you done any thinking on this? Have you thought it through? What's the reality here? They want you to come with some of that. Now, if you're approaching a developer, they're going to want to know, how does your idea fit into the larger organizational system? They want the specs. They don't want your big concept idea. They don't want to talk about trees. They want to know, how are you going to move to milled lumber so they can build something? So you've got to be able to translate that big concept into something real, to show them the steps they're going to have to take to actually do it. They're going to want clear instructions from you on what they're expected to be doing. And guess what? They want it at a granular level of detail. They're also going to want to know, so what's the plan? What are your timelines? What are the milestones we have to hit? Because they're going to try to be figuring out to engineer that bridge for you to make that all happen. Implementers, here's what they're going to be asking of you. They want to know the bottom line. Don't talk in big concepts. End of the day, what are the results? What are the deadlines? What needs to be done by when? Who's going to be doing it? And what is it that exactly that you will be doing? They'll often say to you, so what do you want me to do?
We are so locked into what we do, and the only way to overcome it is to raise awareness, and for everybody to raise awareness and just flag when this happens. Like, well, I think I was overdoing it on the ideation. If that ever gets troublesome for you, flag it for me. I'll rein it in, because we all have the capacity to do all of it. Having an assessment and having it say, oh, I'm an ideator, does not give you a ticket to just do ideation. The whole point is, it gives you a ticket to take responsibility for the fact that you like to do ideation. And from there, it's yours to pivot. Like, I'm talking to a clarifier. I've got to make this conversation work for that person. And this little cheat sheet that Janice has put together, I think is one of the best versions of that I've ever seen for the innovation space.
The net of this is this: teams who have a FourSight thinking preference awareness as well as process awareness outperform teams who don't. We have many research studies that have shown that, whether they're independent or ones that we've been doing with our own clients. And you know, when you look at this FourSight framework, really you can think about it from the standpoint that it becomes a universal framework. So yes, it's helping you understand how you're engaging in creative process, which is what innovation is. It is very much a creative process. When you dig more deeply down into what makes teams effective, how do people work better together, and you start to understand that a large part of a team's role is to problem solve and make decisions so they can advance their goals. What FourSight starts to offer, and certainly we've seen it with our own clients, is a really structured approach to be able to do that problem solving and make the decision making. It's just so nice to see that we can build on the foundation of the research and offer something tangible so that we can do a much better job than saying innovation is hard, collaboration is hard, you know, and we can give people some hope in ways that they might be able to think about that problem a little differently and bridge some of those gaps in the way that they're collaborating in their organizations.